Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My name is Mark Richards, and I'm delighted to serve as your worship associate today and welcome you fully into this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit here. We welcome all you are bringing with you today, and all your heart longs to sit down. We welcome all of you. We extend a special welcome today to guests among us. Guests are warmly invited to attend the Inquirer session today, immediately after the service in the parlor, to learn more about Unitarian Universalism and our church in a smaller, casual gathering. We invite our guests to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you and drop it in the offering plate later in the service. You can also pick up a welcome packet at the back of the sanctuary, where you'll also find hearing assist devices and Braille hymnals. Additionally, a fragrance-free area is located in the first few pews on the front right side of the sanctuary. If you're a visiting family, including children or youth, after the time for all ages, please join the children's recessional and head across the hall to the common room, and there you'll be greeted by somebody who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. My name is Mark Richards, and you can come talk to me at the guest table there. As a way to engage at First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements insert for the numerous opportunities available here. In particular, let me draw your attention to a couple. Our forum speaker this morning is Dr. Tony Papiro, a performance psychologist from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, talking about freedom from depression. Volunteers are needed to help cook and serve a meal for Cathedral Center on Saturday, March 2nd from 6:30 to 8 p.m. You can sign up at the social justice table or email Andy Cinco. And please let your voice be heard as we select our new Director of Religious Education. Swing by the RE table to find out about the survey link that you can fill out. Please find details on these and more events in the announcements insert. Finally, please silence any electronic devices for the remainder of the service. Once again, I welcome you to First Church by inviting you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, which is printed in the order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. I would like now to invite Desiree Pointer-Mace to come up and light our chalice.
Our opening words this morning come from "To Bless the Space Between Us" by John O'Donohue. When we love, we leave our separate solitudes and come towards union where we complement each other. It is this ancient desire to discover and come home to the heart's lost other half that awakens its capacity for love and belonging. There are certain things that can only happen to us in solitude, and every life needs a rhythm of solitude in order to experience those things. However, the experience of self-discovery, psychological integration, and spiritual growth can happen to us only when our desire draws us out of our shells and towards the precarious and life-giving sanctuary of another human heart. Will you please rise in body or spirit and join us in singing our opening hymn, number 114.
Good morning. In 1966, when I was 4, we Hayes settled in Cedarburg. I was a handful, and my brother John was arriving, so Mom and Dad inquired about kindergarten for me, but the public school wouldn't allow a September baby. So instead, I was enrolled at Emmanuel Lutheran and promptly assigned a big golden Bible and a hymnal to memorize. This is the story of how 3 generations of Hayeses found First Church. That wasn't the story. This is the story. During my 2nd grade, we adopted a giant fluffy orange cat from the Humane Society. He was regal and needed a proper name, so I pulled out my hymnal and proposed the name Harold. I had been inspired by the line, "Herald forth the King." Only for context, the complete phrase is, "The star shines to herald forth the King." That would be herald, H-E-R-A-L-D, the verb as in to announce or to acclaim the arrival of Jesus. I thought the star was shining on Harold, the 4th king. But also during 2nd grade, I came home from school, sat down for dinner, and asked my parents, "Did you know that I have sin in my blood?" Within a week, a church search was on. Friends suggested this place, and soon we began to commute. For my parents, this church would help with the hard work of raising children in insane times. Vietnam, assassinations, race riots, the arms race. Fast forward, Angela and I found the same safe and sane harbor when our daughters Kate and Elizabeth arrived. How we get through childhood is largely answered by the decisions of connected adults, who with the hindsight to risk and opportunity, fashion an environment in which a child finds the tools to live and to love and hopefully to survive and start anew. This church fuels that continuum for the Hayeses. Joined with you, we have enjoyed food, art, literature, and architecture. We have marched, cried, laughed, and celebrated. We have said hello to babies and boyfriends, and goodbye to friends and dear family. We have combined forces, poured concrete, swung hammers, built houses, friendships, and confidence. We have pondered the cosmos, cited science, played bingo, read books, changed diapers. We have debated and collaborated, and we have sung and heard hours and hours of glorious music. Incidentally, did you know that we have music in our blood? But most importantly, we have learned about our whole lives. A few weeks ago, we recognized neighbors attending a church service with their 8-year-old. They are in the midst of creating that environment and seeking the right church fit. As the conversation developed, I asked if they knew about OWL, or Our Whole Lives. They did not. So I did my awkward dad best to describe it. Sex ed, identity ed, wellness ed, empathy ed, yes, but it is so much more. With a lifetime immersed in the ideas of this church, I've come to see that OWL is when we Unitarian Universalists are at our very best. It is our boldest, most spiritually differentiated and deliberately empathetic work, and is a powerful magnet to and manifestation of our faith. Just when childhood naivety is colliding with discovery, and when parenting can be the hardest. When the cynical might exploit dark fears, and when the fearful might hide their eyes. We lock hands with the family as its family, and shine a bright light on self-care, self-determination, the trappings and treasures of trust, the authority of consent, and the glory in relationship. And then we walk together into whole lives. The Hayeses can't thank you enough. So when weighing your pledge, please consider that this light shines to herald forth our children.
So today is opening Sunday of our pledge drive. To begin our pledge drive every year, we begin with a covenant between the congregation and our pledge team and our visiting stewards to affirm their call to lead us as a community of generosity. Will the members of the pledge team and those who are serving as visiting stewards this year please come up now to the chancel? The pledge team and the visiting stewards lead the work of generosity. Oh, come all the way up, folks. Sorry. Up the stairs, turn around. Not getting away with that. You might be contacted during the next month by somebody who's standing up here to talk about First Church and your part in our stewardship of this congregation. Our pledge team chair is Fred Gutierrez. Come here, Fred. Our tireless and fantastic leader. And he is going to lead the response part of the covenant with you all, the congregation. So congregation, will you please rise now and enter into the covenant printed in your orders of service with our pledge team. This congregation exists to change lives, to nurture spirits, engage minds, and inspire action in our members and a community.
Stewardship exists to fulfill that mission.
As members of a free and democratic church, we know the loving stewardship of our congregation belongs to all of us.
The Stewardship Council and Pledge Team are pieces of the community acting on behalf of the whole.
We trust you to lead us in lives of stewardship, on a journey of gratitude, commitment, and celebration of our community and values.
We are humbled by your trust and take up this task on behalf of us all.
We move forward together in service and commitment,
giving ourselves to build a beautiful future.
Congregation, will you give a hand to your pledge team and visiting stewards? Elizabeth says, call them back when they call you. Nick just shared with us a beautiful story about how this church has been part of his family's life for 3 generations, and how Al serves our families and serves the world. But each of you has your own story about why this congregation has made a difference in your lives, why this church matters in our community and in the world. And each of us here has a hand in making this place what it is. So the pledge team would like us to begin our stewardship drive this year by reflecting on why we need one another. So for you, why do you think we need one another at First Church? At the end of each of your pews, you will find envelopes. Inside of those envelopes are construction paper and markers. You each have a hand in making this place, so our pledge team wants you all to trace your hands like this. On the construction paper, trace an imprint of your hand. And once you have your hand traced, write down a word or a phrase that summarizes why you think we need one another. So trace your hand and then answer the question, why do we need one another? If you need more paper, you can raise your hand and an usher will come to you with more papers. And we're just going to sit for a moment, trace our hands and reflect on the question, and then the ushers will come and pick up your handprints. After the service this morning, the pledge team also invites you to join them in the common room for the intergenerational joy of cutting out hands from construction paper. They say many hands make light work. Everyone is invited. Now we're about to do our children's recessional hymn. We invite our children and our teachers and our youth to sing verse 1 of this hymn and then proceed to your classes as the rest of the congregation sings you on your way. So will you all please rise now in body or spirit and join us in our children's recessional hymn, number 95, More Love Somewhere. I am delighted to share with you the news this morning that our members Amanda and Tony Pansiera have welcomed a new baby into their family and into the world. Zoe Marianne Pansiera was born on Friday, February 15th at 9:26 a.m., weighing 9 pounds and 7 ounces. Mom, Dad, and Zoe are all happy and doing well. As is our custom in this congregation, whenever we have a birth, an adoption, or a death among our members, we light our candle of life. Today, in honor of Zoe Marianne Pansiera. Will you join me now in a time of contemplation, which will be followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life. So just take a moment and feel the ground beneath you. And the very tip top of your head. And your breath moving in and out, bringing you into here and now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Be with us as we ride the joys and sorrows of living in community. May we celebrate the victories and grieve the losses together. May we know covenant, know that we are one another's people, entrusted to one another's care. We need one another, and together we are stronger. May we be held in this community of trust. May it be so.
A couple of years ago, I was confronted with the fact that I had a real problem trusting people and accepting generosity of others. I've spent the last 20 years serving in the Army, a profession that espouses rugged individualism. Suck it up, drive on, you can sleep when you're dead. Phrases I frequently heard and said myself. There's a lot of risk within the profession. Flying helicopters, jumping out of airplanes, deploying to combat. It led me to question what others are doing and heightened my sensitivity for things that could go wrong, resulting in a high threshold of trust. In 2016, I came face to face with these realities. After months of fighting off what I thought was a really bad cough and fatigue from work, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. My reluctance to trust others was validated right from the start. I met with the oncologist on a Monday, had my biopsy on Wednesday, and got the phone call with the results on Friday. In that phone call, they gave me an inconclusive diagnosis. When I asked if I had cancer, the person said, "Not exactly." And then followed up with 2 hours later to tell me, yes, I definitely had cancer. I spent weeks making sure they were right after the first fumble. A few weeks later, I started treatment, and the generosity started pouring in, both from people I knew and from people I didn't know at all. People were bringing dinners over, cards, texts, and phone calls of love and support were daily occurrences. I heard from people I hadn't talked to in years. Playdates for our kids started showing up on the calendar. Projects at work were being taken off my plate. I couldn't handle how much I had to accept. The fact that I wasn't able to suck it up and drive on felt like I was weak for not being able to persevere. And while the physical effects of cancer and chemotherapy were hard, the emotional toll of skepticism of the medical team and acceptance of unconditional generosity were nearly as difficult. It was my wife, Sarah, who wiped clean my lens of distrust and individualism. She asked me, if one of your soldiers was in your situation, would we bring them dinner and take care of their kids? Of course we would. Would you expect anything in return from them? No, it would be great to be able to help them in any way we could. And if they were skeptical of what was going on around them, I'd tell them to worry about what they can control and take comfort in the community that had their back. After that, things looked and felt a little different. I realized that my nurses always greeted us with a smile and patience, even after seeing dozens of people that day for treatment. I was more relaxed going in for chemo because I knew they were good at what they did. The anti-anxiety meds helped as well. I kept thinking about what I would do if it were one of my soldiers. Well, when someone from PCA called to offer support, I appreciated their calming presence. When friends from church offered to take care of our kids, we took advantage of the opportunity to have a date night. When kids from the mission trip who were now in college called or texted, I relished in the opportunity to hear of their lives and how they were doing. When I needed a ride home from treatment, I didn't feel guilty about calling for a ride from a friend from church. Members of church with whom I also worked with checked in on me and reminded me to focus on my health and that the company will take care of the rest. A friend of mine called me up once I was in remission and asked me a really critical question. What'd you learn from all this? It took a bit of time and reflection, but I learned that the dynamic between giving and receiving is complicated. Be okay with receiving the generosity of others and give to others whenever you can. While my issues with trust are not completely resolved, I'll be better served by assuming positive intent of others. And finally, each night when my head hits the pillow, I'm ever grateful for my health, the wealth of opportunity and community, and the love of friends and family.
In 1938, a group of scientists at Harvard began a longitudinal study of human health and well-being. They recruited 268 sophomores and tracked their physical and mental health and emotional well-being over nearly 80 years. Over the decades, they expanded the original group to include the subjects' children and wives and residents of Boston's inner city, ending up with thousands of subjects. They tracked data on those folks' income, achievements, marriages, and community relationships in addition to their health data and their emotional and mental well-being data. And they used that 80 years of comprehensive data from thousands of people to answer the question, what makes for the healthiest, happiest human life? And the number one factor in happiness was, can you guys guess? You're using the subject of the sermon well. Community was Sheila's guess. Other guesses. What is the number one factor? Relationships, relationships, relationships. It was relationships. But not just how many relationships or whether a person was married. It was the quality of a person's relationships that determined their happiness. It was trust in those relationships. Turns out that when you trust someone, when you have a group of people that you can rely on, your nervous system relaxes, your brain stays healthier for longer, and emotional pain is reduced. In contrast, people who feel lonely are more likely to have their health decline, and they're more likely to die younger. So it's about relationships, not just how many there are, but the quality of them, whether you can be honest in them, whether you can go to the depths of meaning and be your true, authentic selves. Martin Winecki of the Tamara Peace and Research Education Center in Portugal writes in his book, Unlearning Together, that we are the community beings by nature, that we're grounded through community in the interconnected web of all existence. Sadly, isolation and competition in Western culture trains this inherent instinct out of us in ways that harm our well-being. Isolation causes stress on our psyches and on our bodies. Practicing community is medicine. Winecki wrote, "Trust is a crucial factor in creating transformative communities, as trust is a primordial healing power which reconnects us to ourselves, to each other, and to the world. To develop trust, we need ways of living together in which we dare to drop our masks and freely express what we genuinely think and feel and love. Whenever we can do this fully, we experience liberation and allow others to see us. When truth is allowed, trust emerges. To be seen feels like being loved." We practice community by building relationships of trust here in our congregations. We do it in our theme circles, in our circle suppers, in our pastoral care relationships, our programs for children and youth, our social connections and support, and when we worship together as a full body. Studies have shown that when our bodies move together in common rhythm and purpose, it heals trauma and helps rebuild our trust in the world. By singing hymns together, our bodies learn that we are safe and it is okay to trust. In community, we learn that we are part of one another, that your people are my people, and my people are your people. In our small groups and our classes, we create that kind of life-lengthening happiness through depths of relationship that are developed by exploring meaning, by listening to each other's authentic expression of self. Our children and our youth learn things here and have conversations here that they don't have anywhere else in their lives. Our people learn that this community can be relied upon when we show up and care for each other in times of trouble and sorrow. Our pastoral care associates who are trained extensively in listening presence go to homes and hospitals to be with our people when life is hard. And when one of us is dying, your ministers go, bringing your love with us and standing there with our folks in that space between life and death, a bridge to the mystery. This kind of community of trust strengthens and emboldens us in our individual lives and out in the world. Not only do relationships of quality, depth, and trust lengthen our lives and make us happy as individuals, as a community of trust, we are also strengthened. In October of 2018, another congregation that had built a community of trust demonstrated how that kind of community makes a difference in strength, courage, and perseverance. As I'm sure you remember, on October 27th of 2018, during Shabbat morning services at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, a white nationalist entered their sanctuary and began shooting, killing 11 members of their congregation and wounding 7 in the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in our country's history. The very next day, the leaders of that congregation called M. Dove Kent, who's the former executive director of Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, to invite M. Dove to come to Pittsburgh and work with Bend the Ark, a progressive Jewish organization, because they wanted to respond to the attack publicly. The next day. And together with Bend the Ark and M. Dove Kemp, they simultaneously worked to take care of their people and help them grieve, to respond to the attack publicly in Pittsburgh, and to prepare a powerful national action to rebuke the white nationalist undertones of President Trump when he visited the scene of the crime. That congregation was in crisis. They were in mourning. They were in personal and collective trauma. They mourned lost friends and family members dealing with flashbacks of violence and their escape from it. They were experiencing those awful old chords of historical anti-Semitic trauma strummed by this act of hate. Their holy place, their sanctuary of comfort and safety and trust had been violated in the most horrific way. And yet, the congregation pulled together not only to hold one another in love, but also to lead people forward away from hate. M. Dove Kent wrote the following about her experience of working with them. Immediately, she said, they had the resolve to write a letter to Trump that set fire, that changed the national conversation and unmasked Trump for the white nationalist that he is. For this public bravery and this resolve, we all know there are risks. There was every reason for them to go silent and to retreat, and yet they were completely committed to planning an action, to planning a ritual to heal their community's grief, and then to use whatever energy they had left and to use the critical moment that they knew they were in to strike a blow against the violent white nationalist movement that killed 11 of their neighbors and friends. What this looked like in concrete terms was that one of the leaders of that congregation led the action wearing the outfit she was wearing the morning of the massacre, as she was preparing to go to synagogue, that she then changed out of when her friend called her to say, "Don't go to shul. There is a live shooter there." Through their community of trust, through the strength that they had together as a people with shaking hands and hearts of purpose, that congregation did what was needed. They cared for one another in their grief, and then they led 5,000 people in a beautiful rebuke of Trump's white nationalist undertones. They had the mayor of Pittsburgh and a slew of other elected officials join them to say that Trump was not welcome in Pittsburgh. They caused him to change his plan and end his visit early with no public statements whatsoever, in effect kicking him out of town. This synagogue changed the story. They made things possible that had seemed impossible. Through the power of relationships and strength of trust in community, they exhibited courage beyond imaginable bounds and showed the capacity to lead away from hate, even in the face of their own experience of horror. Building relationships and communities of trust makes us stronger, more courageous, and better together. We too create this kind of strength and courage in our own congregation. We walk with our people into the pain of chemo treatments, into the hardness of hospital walls, and the loss of hospice beds. We journey together through the grief of divorce and the trauma of addiction and the loss of our loved ones. And we hold one another's hands in the despair of a world that is shuddering with hate and facing the devastation of climate change. We hold one another's hands and we continue to sing. We build a community of trust together in a world that desperately needs as many of these communities as possible. We pull people out of isolation and we plug them into connection. This matters. This matters here to the people in this room. This matters in Milwaukee, and this matters in the world. This is what your stewardship creates. Your pledge isn't just one more cause that you give to. Your pledge creates your place, this congregation, and holds a place for your people, your community of practice. You all are the stewards of this congregation, and we all are entrusted to your care. Your pledge team has asked you to participate in the bold step into our future this year by increasing your pledge. Because of the very normal loss of pledge income during the senior minister transition that started 5 years ago when Drew retired, we currently have a $107,000 gap between our operating income and our operating expenses. Now, blessedly, as you probably remember, we received an incredibly generous bequest from our beloved Lou Krug 2 years ago, and that's helping us bridge the gap right now, but it's not enough to cover that gap year after year. So our pledge team is inviting us to boldly close the gap this year in order that we can fulfill our mission and continue our programs and serve our members. In a congregation this size, staff runs our programs and serves our people, which is necessary with 750 members so that we don't burn you all out as lay leaders. Your pledge goes to fund our programs, our Whole Lives program that Nick talked about, our pastoral care program that Mark talked about, our music program demonstrated by our gorgeous and amazing choir this morning, and our worship services, which we hold every Sunday, 52 weeks a year for all of our members and friends and guests and visitors. All of these programs require staff to run them, and that requires a pledge-sustained operating budget. So Fred Gutierrez has done the math on this, and I trust him. And he tells me that if every pledging member increased their pledge by $22 a month, we will close the gap this year. $22 a month. I can do $22, I decided. It's the price of a few lattes or one takeout dinner or half the price of getting my nails done. So I'm going to do $22 a month. I'm going to increase my pledge by that much. But I also know that not everyone will be able to increase their pledge by $22 a month, so I decided that I'm also going to pay for someone else's $22 a month. I'll get one less takeout meal delivered. This community means a lot to me. And so I am going to do my part and pay for someone else to close the gap. And I hope that you'll join me in committing to be one of the pledge units that closes the gap this year. And if you can, maybe throw in another $22 for someone else, or maybe a couple of someone else's for someone who is not going to be able to participate in closing the gap this year. And also, since the weather has decided to give us an extra community challenge this morning, I want to ask you for one more thing. Will you have a conversation with someone who was not here this morning about the pledge drive? I'd like to ask you to commit to having one conversation with someone who wasn't here, because we are all the stewards of this community, in addition to answering Elizabeth's phone call if she calls you. We create a community of trust together through both giving and receiving. We give financially, and we give our presence to our people when we show up. We give our expertise as lay leaders, and we give our time to help run the programs of this church. And we receive. We receive the strength and the support of community, the steadiness of worship every week, the inspiration of the music, and the transformation of our people's stories. We receive a community of care and the courage that comes from real and deep relationships of trust. At the end of the lunch, during which the Tree of Life Synagogue members planned that action, one of the leaders of the congregation said, "I am so glad to be having lunch with you today. I was supposed to have lunch with my beloved friend who was murdered, and if I'm going to be anywhere today eating lunch, I am grateful that it is here with you planning this." I am grateful to be here with you all. You make me stronger. You give me the courage to do what needs to be done. You raise my spirits. Thank you for being part of stewarding this community of trust. Amen.
Every week we have the opportunity to practice our values through sharing our resources. Our pledges are at the core of our spiritual practice of generosity. In addition, the church shares half of all non-pledge cash in our offering plate with a community organization. In this way, we commit our resources in line with our belief that this congregation is interdependent with the world beyond these walls. Today, we share the plate with Feast of Crispin, bringing together actors and vets to teach and strengthen emotional resources for traumatic and reintegration issues. May the practice of giving bring us joy. The offering will now gratefully be received.
Will you please rise in body or spirit and join us in the responsive reading printed in your orders of service? This is We Need One Another by George Odell. I'll begin. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted.
We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid.
We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again.
We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone.
We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs.
We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again.
We need one another when we come to die, and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey.
All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
And will you join in singing our closing hymn, number 318, We Would Be One?